Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about something called a baseline. Think of it as the way your brain and body usually start the day, before anything super exciting or stressful even happens. This idea is a real game changer because it can totally shift how you think about your own focus. Have you ever had one of those days where you just can't seem to focus and you start to wonder, what is wrong with me? Well, what we're about to cover might really help. Because often, that feeling isn't about a flaw in you. It's just a pattern your brain is used to. So, if you haven't already, go ahead and open your student workbook to lesson 0.4. All right, let's dive right in. So near the top of your workbook page, you'll see that first question, what is a baseline? Let's get a clear definition together. Okay, so a baseline is basically your usual starting level of energy and focus on a typical school day. And I really want to emphasize that word, typical. We're not talking about your absolute best day ever or your worst day. We're just looking for your most common, everyday starting point. And this is so important. Baselines are not about being good or bad at school. They have absolutely nothing to do with how smart you are. They're just a way to describe your pattern. How awake or drained you usually feel, and how easy or hard it is for you to get things started. So on your workbook page where it asks a baseline is, I want you to pause and just write that down in your own words. It could be something simple like, my usual starting pattern for energy and focus. And for that second question, you could write something like, it describes how my brain and body usually start the day. Okay, great. Now let's see how this actually looks in real life. In your workbook, you'll see 3 common baseline patterns listed. We're going to walk through each one so you can figure out which one sounds the most like you. So on one end of the spectrum, we have the drift starter. This is for those of you who usually start the day in drift. You're awake, sure, but your brain just doesn't feel like it's online yet, and getting started on tasks feels like pushing a boulder. Then, the total opposite of that is the overdrive starter. This is when you start the day totally revved up. Maybe you're rushing in, you're already feeling stressed, or you're trying to juggle 3 things at once. And right there in the middle, we have the balanced starter. This person usually begins the day much closer to that sweet spot, the focus zone. You're not super hyper, but you're not shut down either. Your starting point just feels more steady, more stable. All right, so in your workbook, go ahead and write a quick note for each of those patterns. And then I want you to circle the one that really sounds the most like you on a typical school morning. And seriously, be honest with yourself here. This isn't for a grade. It's about understanding who you usually are, not who you think you should be. Now, what's really cool is seeing how these patterns don't just affect your morning, but how they play out across an entire day. So the next section in your workbook is called My Daily Energy Curve. This is where you get to turn your whole day into a kind of visual map. It's pretty neat. Okay, so how do you actually fill this out? It's pretty straightforward. First, just think of a normal school day. You'll see the grid is broken up into different time blocks. For each one of those blocks, just ask yourself, which energy state am I usually in during this time? Then just mark that box. And hey, if you often move between 2 states during that time, that's totally fine. You can mark both. And just as a quick reminder, these are those 5 states we talked about in our last lesson: stall, drift, the focus zone, overdrive, and breakdown. You'll be using these to fill in your map. So after you've marked up your grid, it's time to figure out what it means. The first question, right below it, asks when you're usually closest to the focused zone. Just look at your map and find the time of day when it seems easiest for you to do that real, focused work. And then the second question asks when you're most likely to feel stall or drift. These are your low energy zones, and honestly, just identifying them is a huge step toward building systems that can actually support you. Maybe it's first thing in the morning, or right after lunch, or even late at night when you're trying to do homework.
And that brings us to the final section, which is where this whole baseline idea becomes a really useful tool. It's not just some interesting fact about yourself. It's the launchpad for building systems that actually work for you.
So, for example, if you circled that you're a drift starter, a helpful system might be something super small, like a tiny, predictable start routine in your first class. Or maybe a simple 2-minute activation habit, like just opening your planner to look at the day. Anything small to get the engine started. Now, if you're more of an overdrive starter, a helpful system might be all about slowing your pace down just a little bit. For instance, using a quick checklist before you dive into a project instead of just sprinting into it. That can help you feel more organized and way less frantic. Okay, so on your page, you'll see a couple of sentences to finish. This is where you get to connect your baseline type to a kind of system that might support you. You don't have to find the perfect answer right now. Just make a good guess based on what you're learning about yourself. And let's not forget these key reminders. Your baseline is about how you start, not how smart you are.
And it can change. Things like sleep, stress, and new habits can all shift it. And really, this is why we're doing this. Knowing your baseline helps you design systems that fit your real life. Go ahead and put a check mark next to the reminders you think you need the most.
And finally, we've got the reflection question. What is one thing you understand about yourself a little better after doing this? Maybe you realized your afternoons really need more support, or that you tend to rush into overdrive and then burn yourself out. Try to be honest and specific.
So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Know your baseline. Because when you do, you can start building systems that fit the life you're actually living, instead of trying to force yourself into some fantasy schedule that you think you should have.
All right, now it's your turn. Go ahead and finish filling out your daily energy curve and all the reflection questions in your workbook for this lesson. When you're all done, you're going to have a much clearer picture of how your day actually runs. And in our next lesson, we're going to build on this by looking at what a system really is and how it can support you way better than just telling yourself to try harder. I'll see you then.